All right, everyone, you read the title. How did I make 1.2K in about 10 to 15 minutes? We will be talking about a trade I took last week, the 29th of January. So that's what we're going to talk about in this video. Now, I'm not going to waste any of your time with long intros and all that. We're going to get straight into the video. Now, before we look at what actually occurred on the markets, I want to do a little recap on what I was looking at before market opened that day. It's very important to do your market research before you place any trades. And we had kind of mixed news that week and for that day specifically. Now, on the 28th, we actually had the Fed funds rate and they did not cut the rates. However, basically all week, last week, we had earnings, and on the Wednesday, specifically on the 28th, we had these big earnings here. We had the Meta and Microsoft, and we had some other earnings as well, as we have been having them now for a couple of weeks, and they have been mostly positive, okay? So that was kind of the mindset I was going into this session. We had the Fed, and then we had the earnings. Now, reading the news, we can clearly here see, this is Yahoo Finance here. Now we can see here that the news are also kind of saying that this is a kind of a mixed situation. We have the positive effect of the earnings. However, the Fed is somewhat of a negative news. So that was kind of the mindset I was going into this session, that price could really kind of go either way. However, I actually had a more positive bias since price had already dropped in the previous day. And I thought that this kind of a pullback had already ended. So now let's talk about what I actually saw before I took my trade and how using the cumulative delta actually saved me money, because I was initially planning on buying. And I had my reasons for that. I'm not really gonna get into those now, but I want to talk about this trade specifically. So looking at the overnight here, which is this in between here, between the black and the red line, that is the overnight, we can see that price is, going upwards. This doesn't really mean all that much, but the biggest clue we actually get is in the cumulative delta here below, where we can see that in the overnight, cumulative delta was very close to negative 10,000. And when I actually saw this, and my initial thought was to buy that day, this actually gave me a huge red flag, and I had to reassess the situation, thinking that for me to be able to buy this day, I would really have to see some very clear confirmation that price was going to go up. So this one piece of information here, this super negative cumulative delta minus 10,000 on the overnight, which is quite rare. Let me tell you, for the cumulative delta to go to 10,000 on either direction on the overnight is quite rare. That doesn't really happen all that often. So for that to happen, you really, at least from my experience, you really have to take that very seriously, because that's obviously telling you something. And we can see that there's no pullbacks on the cumulative delta. It's just going down. Okay, so that means that there's a lot of negative pressure building all overnight, even though price isn't really going down. Okay, so this could be classed as a delta divergence also. So with that being said, when market opened, which is the red line here, so as you can see here, right from market open, price starts to drop down. And at first I thought this was going to be a pullback which we could buy, but I can't really remember what I saw in the footprints. But something convinced me that maybe I should sell. Obviously, I had kind of a 50-50 bias on the outset, and I was going to let that day's price action convince me on which direction I should take the trade to. Now, usually my trades don't really go that way. Usually I have a pretty clear idea what I want to do before the session even opens. This day, the markets convinced me to sell, and I actually got a bit of a late entry. I can't really remember exactly where it was, but I remember my exit was, I think it was right here. Now, hindsight, I should have targeted way lower. And also I took my trade with one contract on the ES. So that was around 1.2k in profits with one contract. So that is a pretty decent win in about 10 minutes. Now, obviously, if I had had more contracts on, there would have been a lot more profits, and my targets would have also been in different places. Now, the point of this video is to kind of show you that you can't really disregard any crucial piece of information. There's so many factors that contribute to being a profitable trader. And this day, this negative 10,000 cumulative delta saved me from actually losing money because I was planning on buying. And when I saw that the cumulative delta was so negative, I thought that maybe buying wasn't the best idea. So I actually held off on that. Now, what's actually really interesting is that we had a very similar type of day very recently. I'm going to try to find that. So this is now the second day of February. So this is actually yesterday. I didn't trade this day. Perhaps I should have. But you can see that we have a very similar situation as we had on the 29th. The red line again is the start of the RTH. And we can see that just before market open, the cumulative delta is actually almost at negative 8,000 again, which is a huge red flag. Now, obviously, this day was a huge rally. So it's not exactly similar, but we also have the same example from the cumulative delta. So this is exactly why discretion is so important, because you can have the same situation happen on the cumulative delta, but the price action be completely different for that session. So that is also why you need to learn how to read the cumulative delta appropriately. I actually have a cumulative delta in-depth guide in my channel. So I actually recommend you go watch that video. And also, if you like this trade review, make sure to come and join my lives on Kick when I'm live. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to look at the top comment below. It has a link to my free trading Discord. Come and join me there. And also come and follow me on Kick so that you don't miss any of my streams. I'll see y'all in the next one.